Ladies and gentlemen, really excited to be here. Could you do me a favor though, Heather, go to the next slide first, and then we'll come back to this one. Because I want to tell you a little bit about why we do this presentation. We've only done it a few times, and it's kind of new. Now, you know me, some of you do. Sorry about that. I'm looking at you. So I grew up in a small town. I shot my mouth off too much about the need for community building and community development. Wound up in the provincial legislature. I was an MLA. I had a lot of cabinet roles and served under 5 different premiers. But I've been through rehab, so I'm fully recovered. we're all much better now, and my therapist says I'm doing really well. So I went to building communities, which is how I wound up in provincial politics, and I wrote that 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. So that's me. Beside me is my business partner and colleague, Heather Thompson. Heather works part-time, like 90% of the time with 13 Ways, and the other 90% of somehow she finds the time. She works as the executive director of the brand new Center for Cities and Communities at the University of Alberta, the only center of its kind in Canada. So it's like a perfect sort of partnership. Plus she has 2 very young children and a husband, and like, I don't know how you do all this, but. So you know what? I talk all the time about community building and the importance of it and the need for it. And Heather talks all the time about retail and about small towns and about redevelopment and about businesses and about consumer behavior. And it just happened, a few projects that were worked on together, we came up with this presentation. So it combines the best of what I present with the best of what she presents. All right? And that's why we call it Battling. Yeah. Arrival of the Inevitable. This is how the world is changing. So,
Let's do it.
Yeah, do you have anything that you want?
Nope.
Okay.
Let's do it. Go ahead. First thing.
Okay, you know what we've been saying for a long time? You probably heard me in any other presentations talk about how much the world is changing. In fact, I've got my 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, and the first chapter is don't have good quality water, because water is critically important to survival, right? You can go for 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food, or you die. And then the federal government brilliantly came along, and I don't care what you think about politics, and we're not discussing that, but the federal government finally recognized high-speed internet is critical, and it got declared an essential service. And if I wrote someday another 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, the first chapter will be don't have broadband and connectivity, because it's so pivotal to every single thing we do. And we've seen communities change over time before the pandemic. For the last 10 years, I've been telling people that younger people are moving out of Los Angeles and they're moving to Des Moines, Iowa. They're moving from Des Moines, Iowa, because now it's really expensive, to Linesville, Indiana. And they're doing it because they want to be part of a real community. And the brilliance is that when I first wrote the Rural Development Strategy for the province of Alberta back in 2003, yes, that's a long time ago, I'm old now. I was a brand new MLA, and people used to say, if we lose our school in our little town, no one will ever move here. Except, now you can do education online. And it was already happening before the pandemic, but we learned through the pandemic, you can do education online. In fact, you can go take advanced education from anything from a certificate program to a PhD online now, and never actually set foot in a classroom. We watched healthcare evolve, and I know we've got some technology we talked about around healthcare that's to deliver healthcare services that were mandated and pushed by the pandemic. But you know, Warren Buffett and 2 other CEOs got together and they complained. They said, we're sick and tired in the United States of everyone complaining about Obamacare. Should we have it? Shouldn't we have it? Enough. And they got together and created an online portal so that all of their staff, every single employee in those 3 companies, could go online and access a doctor over their lunch break, online. And they actually started to invest in online tools. So now, you know the tricorder they have in Star Trek? It's a real thing. It does 3 real tests right now, retinal scans, blood, breathalyzers, and something else. And they want to add up to 100 more tests to it and sell it in the drugstore so you can take it home and do tests. And they think that with all of the people they have, the staff that they have accessing online healthcare, that they will now be able to plug in to a USB port. You can see a doctor, they can do all sorts of scans and tests, and then if they're not qualified to help you and you need a specialist, you can see one of those at lunch hour. And they've already integrated that. Now, it was coming before the pandemic, but we've seen how doctors said, I'm not doing calls to, you need a prescription renewal? I'm sorry, you can't call it in, you have to come and see me because I only get paid when you come and see me. And then the pandemic came and the entire system was forced to change. It wasn't the doctor's fault. That's the only way they got paid. The system changed so that doctors could be paid when they talk to you on the phone. It mandated these transitions. Education, healthcare, even socialization. I can't tell you how many seniors, semi-retirees, that I have talked to who have said, you know what? During the pandemic, I got to talk to people on my iPad. I socialized on my device. Everything in our society was transforming. And before you think this is bad or new, just remember, I took my oldest, he's now 16, but he was like 13 at the time, to get his hair cut. And on the counter at the barbershop, they had wasn't a barbershop, but I call it a barbershop because I'm a guy, but it was the really nice hair. And you know what? What do you call it? It's not a barbershop. Hair salon. Sorry, there we go. Okay. So you know what? There was one sitting there on the counter, this old green phone. You remember those? We used to pick it up and it was attached to the cord, it was attached to the wall, and you had to dial all the way around. My son looked at me and said, "What is that?" Now this thing wasn't plugged in. I was like, "Why do you have that there?" They're like, "It's an heirloom." Well, nothing made me feel old. Like, what I called all my friends in high school with was now an heirloom. And my son, I said, "This is a telephone. I used to call my friends on it." And he looked at me and went, "Huh, I think you're pulling my leg, Dad." No, I'm not joking. I was like, "What do you mean? Why do you think I'm pulling your leg?" He said, "Well, if that's a phone, where do you get the pictures?" Because every phone he has ever seen, it's a selfie, you get pictures on it. And then he picked up the receiver, I showed it how it worked, and he held it up to the side of his head, and then he was like, "Oh, that's why we have the symbol. Look on your cell phone. This is still the symbol for making a phone call," and he had no idea why we still use that symbol. So before you think that technology is changing things too fast or too much, just remember, think back about how much we've already gone through. And technology is not going to slow down. It's going to continue to change, and it's impacting everything in our communities.
Especially businesses.
Especially
I love those
businesses.
stories. Okay, so obviously I'm going to talk about the business side of this, and to Doug's point, we were seeing technological advances well before the pandemic. I think we can all agree on that. And I, for one, was actually really happy to see such a massive shift in the retail and commerce space because we were well overdue for one. So a quick stat just to prove my point here. That's a picture of Doug.
Off the internet last week.
Okay, so before the pandemic, about 55% of baby boomers, so people born between 1946 and 1964, were shopping online pretty consistently. That number is now 86% and growing. Just goes to show, right? Like the majority of humans now are pretty comfortable with shopping online. QR codes, right? The winner of the pandemic. Yeah. Everyone knows how to use a QR code. Like my mom can use a QR code. Like that's my litmus test. That's how we know we're moving forward. So QR code, it might seem simple, quick response code in case you didn't know what QR stand for. That lady there is shopping for groceries. It's not actual groceries. It's not actual product. It's QR code with pictures of product. And it's at a subway station in Seoul, South Korea. So she's doing her commute and she's shopping. So things will be delivered to her house. This sort of example would make sense in a dense population like Seoul, South Korea. But my point here is that everybody's getting used to technology. And we're starting to see this cool thing take place, and I think it's largely because of the pandemic, is this notion of democratizing digital. Before the pandemic, it was arguably somewhat expensive to get a digital platform, to do some sort of digital implementation around social media and your website and all those different things that we were talking about in the last discussion. But now, because of the pandemic, there's so much infrastructure that has taken place that it's really inexpensive to get yourself a digital presence. And if you have a business, if you have anything that is client facing, anything that someone has to interact with you, you have to have a digital presence, you have to. And a couple years ago I said maybe not, but now I completely take that back, you have to have a digital presence. Things like smart cards, which we'll talk about here in a second. Consumers want these things. Consumers are telling us that they want the digital advances because it makes their lives better. It's not about making our lives completely seamless. We still like the human interaction, that's very important, but we want the digital advances. 50% of Canadians have cryptocurrency. Again, I don't have cryptocurrency. I was really surprised by that. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm really behind. But again, it just is a really staggering statistic to show you that people are excited about this new digital wave. All right, so let's talk about some cool things that are coming down the pipe. Okay, so has anyone seen Pepper, the robot? Has anyone seen her in real life? Yeah, she's everywhere. When I showed that picture to Doug, what did you say?
Well, I have another picture in the presentation. She's a doctor, but she's not programmed for that necessarily.
Yeah, she's not necessarily, she can be anything. So if you go into a store and you say, hey, I need size 6 boys hockey skates, you can like follow Pepper and she'll take you right there. And have you guys been to Boston Pizza and seen the new robot?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I just saw that.
Isn't it weird? I'm not saying the robots are coming for us, but they might be. We do it.
Oh my god, I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's. Oh, my kids, like it was awesome. I'm like, oh my god, I don't have to even get the iPad out. They were just watching the freaking thing go back and forth.
I just want to point out the different impressions that people have when they see it. Because the same Pepper is used also as a doctor now in the United States, programmed with all the algorithms to diagnose and getting thousands of times more accurate diagnosis than traditional doctors. We've all been to a doctor where we told them the symptoms and they go turn to the computer and go on WebMD, right? You can't memorize everything. But you go to this doctor and you give them the symptoms, how we respond to some of this technology.
Which is, so actually, it's a good setup for my next point. Has anyone been to an Amazon Go store, seen a smart cart? Okay, so there's really cool technology, whether it's using QR codes, the Amazon Go stores, you go in, you scan your phone when you get in there, and then if you're standing somewhere and you take like some bread off of a shelf, based on the weighted sensors and the cameras in the stores, it automatically builds your phone, so you just leave. Or a smart cart, where you scan the item before you put it in the cart and you just leave. And I think this world of a checkout experience is coming to an end, or at least I really hope it does. I think one of my Heather hot takes, which is not scientific at all, but I do think in the next 10 to 15 years, we're not gonna see a checkout experience. Who's been in an Uber? You just get out, right? It's making me grumpy, the amount of times I'm waiting in line. We were back a couple weeks ago, we're standing in line for like 30 minutes to get our stupid rental car. And I'm like, this is so unnecessary. And then like the stupid paper prints, it's like perforated edges, and like this is insane. This is like an absolute like museum relic.
So what do we do with all of the blue-collar jobs and all of the actual people that need to feed their families?
Can we ask? We'll
Pause
talk
that.
about that after. I got a good answer.
Yeah. So the cool thing, and I'm glad actually you brought this up, because I was about to say, when we look at these sort of enhancing the consumer's experience, it's actually not taking away jobs. I want to be really clear about that. When you are looking at the data and the actual labor reports, anytime you have things that are a little bit more automated, you still have the same amount of staff, if not more. You are just repurposing people. So that is like my in-laws said the same thing. They're like, well, that's taking some jobs. It's not taking jobs, it's repurposing jobs into different points of the business.
Let's talk about that because I've got so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's okay, but I want to be really clear about something. Self-checkouts, right? Brutal. Like, would you believe me if I told you they're 30 years old technology? So when I say no checkout, that's not the same as self-checkout, okay? Because some people are like, oh my god, self-checkouts are bad. They are bad, they have to just go away. I'm talking about like a no checkout. Like you go into the store, you pay for it with your phone, and you just leave. So this is something I'd be really excited about. But I think the bigger point with all this is that we're not getting rid of the physical element. Digital experiences are really important. That's how it's going. We cannot overlook that, and we cannot be grumpy about it. We can't be sitting here like we were in the 90s, being all mad about the internet and saying the internet's never going to catch on. It's catching on. It's here. So we just need to be prepared for it. And as businesses, we have to be ready to respond because that is what our customers are wanting. But my point here is that we have also a really large physical world too that we need to be engaging in. And I would argue that's actually more important now to be preparing and investing in your physical space than it was before the pandemic.
Beautification. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard this before, but beauty matters, it counts. In my 13 Ways to Kill a Community, chapter 6 is don't paint. And that's one of the best ways to kill your community because we're actually all attracted to aesthetically pleasing things. No one has ever gone to buy a house and looked at it and said, oh, that's ugly, it will never work for me, I'll take it. You don't go onto a car dealership and say, I'd like the most rundown piece of garbage you have, because that's what I appreciate. No one has ever been sitting there at a wedding dance or the bar or the party and looked across the room and said, oh my God, he's ugly. I'm gonna go ask him out. You just don't. We are attracted to aesthetically pleasing things. And it's the reason why is because it sends an impression that we believe in ourselves. We believe in whatever. You take good care of your vehicle, and people who go to buy it later are like, well, they took good care of it. They must have appreciated it because it doesn't have the rust and it sends a message. And your community is the exact same way. Beautification matters. It sends a message to the rest of the world who's passing it. Do people in this community care about it? Because the first sign that no one cares is that things get run down. It's just an expansion of the broken window theory. A broken window leads people to say no one cares about this building, and pretty soon it's spray painted and all the windows are broken. And then because that building is broken, the next one gets broken. And then there's some tall grass and now drug deals happen. It just expands that no one cares about this place, why should I? And so it sends an important message. And I know I hear people say all the time, oh, Doug, that's still superficial. We'll spend the next 10 years investing all of our money in all the important, fundamental stuff. And then we'll get to beautification after. Because it's still, it's hard to explain to people why their tax dollars are going for beautification. Except what happens after 10 years of investing in all the core stuff that really matters, that really makes your community at its heart and soul better, but everyone keeps driving by, and no one actually stops in, because as soon as they go by, they're like, I don't think anyone cares about this place. In fact, one of my favorite examples on the business side is A&W. Do you know what happened to A&W in the 80s when it was close to death? Do you know how it got reinvigorated? They interviewed the CEO, sorry, I've been working with municipalities a long time. They interviewed the CEO of A&W on W5, 60 Minutes, one of those, and they said, what was the one thing that you did to turn this around? And he said, clean bathrooms. There we were, realizing that we had parents on long road trips and they're stopping in to say, well, we gotta get something to eat and fill up with gas, and where are we gonna go? And then they always said, a clean bathroom. I mean, it was the first sign that the bathroom's clean, the food must be at least safe to eat. It sends a message. And before you say, oh yeah, that's still a nice to have, we'll work on it later, we are actually genetically encoded to be attracted to aesthetically pleasing things. It is not a nice to have. Our brains are programmed from that for thousands of millennia. I'll show you an example, okay? A female cheetah comes out of the jungle. It's time to find a mate. So she looks, because there's two mates in this clearing, and she looks at one, and he comes out of the jungle, muscular, nice hair, bright eyes, right? She looks at the other one, and he comes limping out of the jungle with his tail busted, and pus coming out of his eye, and mangy hair, and skin stuck to his ribs. Which one is she attracted to? That one. Not because she's superficial and thinks beauty is everything, but that one looks successful. And so it's at the very core of our psychosis or neurosis or the way we think that beauty says whether people in the community appreciate the community they have, whether they believe in it enough to invest in it, and that tells other people, maybe I should invest here too. Beauty matters.
I think you're gonna steal my saying, which is aesthetics are not nice to have, they're a cost of staying in the game. So at the university, we're really lucky. So the new center that Doug was referring to is actually formerly the School of Retailing. So within the University of Alberta, there's a center that was specializing on retail research. And what we saw was that the businesses that were really investing in beauty, and when I say beauty, I don't mean like chandeliers and wallpaper, I mean clean. I mean things that are like really well lit. The amount of times that we will do business assessments or secret shops and we'll see, hey, the business will say, I can't compete with Amazon. And it's, well, your store's really gross and it's dirty and there's dust bunnies and the windows are really gross. These are all things that really matter. This is what, to Doug's point, we care about that. We add value to that. So let's talk about a few things really quickly. So when we're talking about like beautification, like communities in bloom, we're talking about greenery, we're talking about flowers. We are psychologically coded to love that. It's because we associate it with wealth and food. And so when we see it, it instantly makes us feel confident. And when we feel confident, we spend money. I'm really passionate about making money, not from a greedy stance, but to make you guys feel very prosperous and profitable. Pretty privilege is a real thing. When there was, in Detroit and Chicago, there was a lower socioeconomical neighborhood, and they gave that neighborhood the same light fixtures, the same benches, the same picnic tables, they gave the same park equipment as the more affluent neighborhoods, and their vandalism rate went down by 25%. Right? We're nicer to things that we have value with. So that whole world around beautification makes such a difference. 96% of adults participate in retail therapy, and 85% of them say that it makes them feel better. During the holidays, so we know, was it like November 12th to January 1st, holiday shopping, most businesses make a third of their sales in that like 6-week time, right? And online shopping, yeah, it goes up, but foot traffic goes up like this. And a huge part of that is because it looks nice. We like the lights, we like the whole hustle and bustle. I know it's been a few years since we've been able to do it, but holiday shopping is a really good indicator that we like the physical environment. And if you actually look at what's happening in our brain when we are shopping in a physical capacity, our serotonin and dopamine levels are firing as if you were on crack. Okay, I don't have any experience with crack, but I do understand that that's probably correct. Yeah, they did it's a really, I know, I should stop saying that because everyone's like,
No, it's good.
but it's a really interesting correlation, and that's why people are like, oh, brick and mortar is actually growing. I'm gonna talk about that in a second, because we're talking about this whole new world about how people are shopping, and we're talking about the experience economy. There's no such thing as bricks and clicks or omni-channel. I get really irritated when I hear that. It's just the whole experience, and beautification and a nice looking thing is part of that experience. Okay, so just to really hammer a point home, sorry. There we go. Okay, so I wanna say no to this. So I wanna be really clear on this. So a lesson I learned with my husband, he's like, look, I got twinkle lights. I'm like, great, for the backyard. No, they weren't twinkle lights. They were like weird LED tube lights for like an he got it like a shop that he was working at. Not helpful. So I like to do pictures. So one of my very best pieces of advice I can ever say, I worked at Lululemon for, 10 years, and we were never allowed to have an empty shelf. I understand sometimes there's market and vendor agreements. Never have an empty shelf. Never use your windows as signage, ever. You wanna make sure people can see in. Profitability drastically goes down when your windows are, even if it's promotions, even if it's talking about your business or your pictures of food or whatever it is that you're doing, do not put signs up in your window. Doug and I were in a community here in Alberta. We did a 4-block walk. 217 signs were taped up in the windows. I was so irritated because it's not worth it. Social media is where you put your information, not your windows.
And they were also, because they've been up for a long time, they were wrinkled, they were sun spotted, the water had run down. Like it looked like no one had opened the door and been in the building for a while, and it just sent the message, no one cares.
No confidence. So yes to this. So let's talk about Roy G. Biv, so the rainbow, right? So if you have a minute, read Why We Buy by Paco Underhill. It's incredible. It talks about our brains when we are shopping. Why men go to the right when you go into the store and women go to the left. It's fascinating. But he talks about rainbow. And I know this to be true because in our brains, we just gravitate towards rainbow. It's the same thing when we see it in the sky. It's rain, we like it. So when I worked at Lululemon, at the West End store, we did about $3,000 a week in headband sales. Remember the headbands? Remember they're big, right? So after reading that in the book, I'm like, let's try a rainbow headband wall. So we did it. We did the entire rainbow. And our headband sales in 1 week went from $3,000 to $6,500. And by the end of the month, it was $8,200 a week. I mean, there could have been another coincidence, but I really doubt it. Powers of rainbow are really important. Merchandising makes a big difference. So yes to all of this. Okay, so let's talk about the new marketplace. Let's talk about what's happening in this space. So, department stores. When was the last time you were at a department store?
Last week.
Last week? Which one?
The Bay.
Oh, see, the Bay. So the Bay is doing an interesting turn of events right now. Lots of cool partnerships. The cool thing about department stores is that they've been around forever, right? Like this is a picture from the 1880s. So when you go into a department store, think back to your days at Sears, at the Bay, what's the first thing you encounter when you walk in? Perfume. Yes. People hate it. Why do you think they did it? Horses. The smell of the horses on the street. The street smelled really dirty, so they had the perfumery right when you walk in. And I think that's really cool. I think it's a cool history thing. But they never changed it. And 92% of people hated the perfumery, and they never changed it. And they weren't seeing all the writings on the wall, they weren't adapting enough to make sure that they were figuring out what their customers wanted. And I want to be really clear about this point. Distribution is not a model for success. When I say brick and mortar retail is growing, it is growing. But it doesn't look like it because we have so much physical office space and retail space we have to be purposeful with. 30 years ago, an average retail bay was about 5,000 square feet. Now it's closer to 1,200 square feet, or what people are looking for. And we have to be really intentional with what we're going to do with that space, because consumers think they can be the distributors themselves. They can go right to things like Amazon. 56% of Canadians will go to Amazon to do a product search, and 26% of those people will go on to continue to purchase that product. A couple years ago, I said, don't bother to compete with Amazon, you'll lose. And I completely take that back because of the pandemic. Completely take it back. Because of the pandemic, we have all this infrastructure to compete with Amazon, and that number of 26% is actually dwindling. It's actually going down, because as small businesses, as local businesses, we can actually compete with Amazon because we can give the same frictionless experience, but we can give a better experience, even online. Think about your experience on Amazon. It's not super, right? The website's not even nice to use. Like, it's kind of clunky, it's pretty cluttered. So as a small business and as a community, we can actually now give Amazon a run for their money. The digital economy program, this is a picture of our students. So I know that we were alluding to this program earlier, but here in Alberta, there are programs everywhere that are helping businesses get some sort of digital presence to compete with Amazon, to make sure that you are so profitable here in your local business that you are not just having your geographical area, you have the entire world that's using your business. There's a really cool store in Estevan called Jenny Jones. She does so much of her sales on, right? Like on Instagram and like all over the world, the best stuff. And you go into her store, it's like really busy and it's like quite full. And I'm like, oh, like how much of your stuff do you sell here to local? She's like, about 25%, which is like pretty good. That means 75% of her product is coming from outside the province. So it's really interesting, 75% of her sales. Let's talk about Walmart really quickly. Is there a Walmart here?
Yeah.
Okay. Nothing against Walmart, right? Love Walmart, kind of. But people don't actually love the experience of Walmart. Nobody's like, yes, let's go hang out at Walmart. People hate it. And one of the really good indications, is anybody from Walmart here? Is this a safe space?
Walmart is down, but he is from Walmart.
No, like, is anybody here working, like, is Mr. Walmart here?
No, well, they can't talk every time I go.
Okay,
So I think-
here's the thing, so Walmart definitely has its, but they realized they had a problem because their click and collect was so successful, which gave them an indication that people actually didn't like shopping in their stores. People were really excited to just pull up, get their stuff, and head out. So Walmart has come up with this new thing called the town center. So this is, they're gonna use similar square footage, so Walmart's about 300,000 square feet when you take in the parking lot. They wanna keep that same amount of square footage, but they want to repurpose it. They wanna do things that are local to the community. They wanna have a playground for children, or a cafe, or a restaurant. They wanna house the same product, similar price point, but they don't need all of that space. This is what I'm talking about. We don't need that physical space anymore to house the product. Because 30 years ago, that was how we made money. We had to have the inventory on hand. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a business. Now shipping is so sophisticated and people want to ship right to their house, they don't need all the space in just housing inventory. So they're gonna repurpose the space, and their goal is for you to say, hey, let's go hang out at Walmart. Which I can't wrap my head around ever, but they're trying.
Can I just re-emphasize? We couldn't compete against Walmart when they had their supercenters, and now Walmart realizes they need to do things different. That some of their models have fire pits and walking trails and a wine bar and what does that sound like? It sounds like our downtown main streets. They're trying to duplicate that's why they call them community centers. So all the hoopla that we can't compete against Walmart, guess what? Walmart figured out they can't compete against us if we do things right.
So when I say brick and mortar is growing, I mean it's growing in a very specialized way. So like the big department stores, that's starting to dwindle a little bit. So I'm just gonna give you a few examples. So House of Knives, has anyone been in there? They have a good location, yeah. What do they sell? Right. I know, it's crazy. I know, good thing I'm here, right? But it's interesting, right? As a grown-up, one of my bigger surprises of being an adult was taxes. Also how expensive knives are, right? It makes sense that they have their own store and they do like all these demos. It's really interesting. The bottom picture there, the Container Store. Anyone know what this is?
Just a big box store.
Or it's a little box store. Thanks, Oliver. That's great. But I think the cool thing about this is that, yes, it's a big box store, but this is, all they sell are things for organizing and containing your stuff. Like 100,000 square feet of organizational stuff. 30 years ago, this would not be a thing. It would be part of an existing store, right? They would have like maybe 5,000 square feet in a bigger store, but now they have 100,000 square feet just organizing stuff. And I want to go so bad, and we don't have one in Canada. So if anyone is thinking of a new business venture, I'll go in with you. And Crocs. Okay, so if there's one thing to remember, forget everything Doug said, Crocs are back in fashion.
No.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
can
sorry.
I didn't believe Heather either, and I went to Boston and I walked into a store and like, this is cool. They had ties, they had clothes, they had dress shoes, and it was Crocs. But I only saw those things in the back corner. I didn't know what they were. They've changed.
But those Crocs are cool. Like wearing those Crocs, like I'm not sure, okay, everyone's all like, but trust me, I'll be back here next year wearing Crocs and you'll be like, oh yeah, looking good. I look good. My point with this is that even Crocs had their own store, right? They did something right. They were like, we're double downing on this. Find me a medical professional, a child, a mom at the swim class that isn't wearing Crocs, right? They know what makes them special. They love it. So this is what's growing.
Okay, so Heather talked about redefining the marketplace. We have to redefine the marketplace, and consumers are already redefining the marketplace. The whole perfume at the front of the store and department stores still do that is because that's what they've always done. I had this story I like that a friend told me about once, and I won't name any names, but she used to make a roast for Christmas. And she said every year she would take the roast and she would cut it in half and then put it in the oven. And one day her husband asked her, why do you do that? And her mom's sitting there and she said, because my mom did that. And mom goes, yeah, I did that too. And well, why do you do that? Well, because our grandma did that too. And they couldn't figure out why they kept doing that. Did it make the roast better? And then they called her and she said, well, that's because we have a small oven and you had to cut it in half to get it to go in. You see how we do things over and over, generation after generation, like perfume in the front of a department store, and yet the market's changing. Our communities are changing too. And I'll take you back. In the 1950s is when it started. In the 1950s, you still had people living on Main Street above their own business. And so I still remember being in my hometown here in Alberta in the 70s. I have to point that out, because if I say still remember when I was a kid, she's like, yeah, that's back in the 50s, that's about right. But I still remember in the 70s, in the late 70s and early 80s, going downtown on any night of the week, after school, at 5 o'clock, at 7 o'clock, there were vehicles downtown, there were people downtown, there were people socializing, it was an active place. But I was there just a year ago again because my dad passed away, and I was there on a Thursday in the middle of the day and there wasn't a damn vehicle on the street. You would have swore they could have filmed an alien invasion movie where everyone was sucked up and gone because there was no one. And I thought, what happened? What happened was that in the 50s, we had people downtown and then we all created this American dream. And it's still colloquially called the American dream. You could build suburbs and subdivisions on the outskirts of town. Land was cheap. You could buy it so cheap, and a house to build it was $25,000. So you built the house with a white picket fence, 3 bathrooms, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a 2-car garage. And then we all moved out to the suburbs, and it was great. Except by the 70s and the 80s, when everyone was out in the suburbs and no one lived on Main Street anymore, we looked around after we got to the suburbs and we said, do you want to go downtown for supper? And everyone was like, no, let's just stay here. And so we stayed in the basement, we cocooned in the backyard, and that was it. Well, every restaurant will tell you their most profitable time, their most profitable meal is the supper hour. Because you have supper, usually the most expensive one, dinner,
I'm from rural Alberta, I don't know what you guys, I once when I was in MLA, someone said, let's meet for dinner. I showed up at noon. And they showed up at 6 o'clock. I was like, bastards stood me up. But they could have said supper. That's when I would have, anyway. Well, I know it's weird. So no one went back downtown. The restaurants, their supper hour dried up. They sell a little bit of alcohol. It's a 50 to 100% markup. And that's what their most profitable time was. But that died because no one came back downtown after 5 o'clock for supper. So all you have is breakfast and lunch. And then, you know, our businesses on Main Street went more to commodity-based businesses. We pulled up and we bought our stuff and then we left. Once in a while we'd stop in and we'd have lunch. But then the only thing left after a while, because there was no socialization and people didn't stay there anymore, was a group of what we call the Senate that would show up and have coffee for 4 hours at 50 cents a cup. And you can't keep a business open at 50 cents a cup of coffee. And so restaurants started to close. And then there was no socialization, so it just enhanced the commodity side. We pulled up, we bought our stuff, and we left. And our downtowns died. At 5 o'clock, it was closed. And it was confirmed to me when I went to Philadelphia many, many years ago with there were 4 of us. And the other guy and I said, let's go get a bottle of wine. We were right downtown. So we asked the front desk, where do we get a bottle of wine? They said, it's a couple blocks that way, but you know, it's 4:45, you should hurry. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I was thinking it was going to close, so we left. Walked a few blocks, kind of got lost, and George and I were walking along, and there was no one. It was like 20 after 5, and there was no one in downtown Philadelphia. And a guy came around the corner, and he looked at me. George is oblivious, but he looked at me like, "You're on my block. You're dead." And he walked by and bumped both of us, and George's like, "I can't find the wine." And I was like, "George, we're gonna get killed." So we went back to the hotel, and they said, "Ooh, you went the wrong direction. It's right around behind the hotel." So we went and got the wine. But I asked them what happened, and they said, at 5 o'clock, no one lives down here. So at 5 o'clock, 20 to 5, everyone vacates, and there isn't a soul around here anymore, and the gangs take over. Now think about what that means for our downtowns when they're dead. You walk down there now at night, and it's dead. That used to be the heart and soul of our communities, and it's gone now. We need to reinvigorate that. But if we keep designing our communities the way we did in the 70s and the 80s, when the world has changed, and post-pandemic, everyone is craving socialization. They're craving being in a community. I mean, I said before, they were moving out of LA to Des Moines. Now, they're moving out in droves out of everywhere and moving to small communities because they want to be part of a real, authentic community like Okotoks, where people connect, and they bond, they know the local business owners, and there's stuff to do downtown. That's what they're looking for. So if we keep up with our continuous, our downtown designs and the way we build housing, the way we did in the 60s and the 70s and 80s, we're going to continue to not redefine our communities, and our citizens aren't going to move there anymore. Because the communities that are growing right now have social events, they bring people downtown, there's activity, it's alive. One of my favorite examples is Raymond, that had a drive-in movie theater. It wasn't really drive-in, you parked and you brought your lawn chair on Main Street, and they had a blow up drive-in, you could just plug it in and it blows up. And they got bought a pass or whatever to a Bon Jovi concert. It was live, it was in New Jersey, but it was live on the Main Street in Raymond, Alberta. And they said they had people come from over 100 miles away, come and watch and socialize. And yet, and here's the big problem, I'm not going to name the community, but there was another community which wasn't yours, but it was another community that was outside of a city of 1 million people, also in Alberta. And that community said, we need to reinvigorate ourselves, do something really dynamic. Now, we went and measured the community, and they had about 300 people a day on a Saturday on Main Street, come up and down Main Street. They said, we want to attract new people, so we talked about how to market, we found 3 neighborhoods in this city of, I just about said it, you know where it is. They had 3 neighborhoods where those people couldn't afford their homes like they thought they could and wanted to be in an authentic community, and we said, just market to them. Close down the street on Saturday, and 4 blocks, put up a live stage and have live music on one end, have a live drive-in movie on the other end, have stuff for kids, close it down and make it a real social experience. And they did it, and over 13,000 people came out of the city of Calgary to that community, to Main Street. Sorry,
No, it's fine. You did. I mean, you're like 50-50 chance.
the
of what
city of Edmonton. Came out of the city of Calgary to go to that community, that
And the businesses were really happy. They had people that actually called realtors and said we could live here. It was a boost to the community. And you know what? They did it once. You know why? Because business owners on Main Street said, no, I don't like this. People can't park in front of my business. And they shut it down. 13,000 people, from 300 to 13,000 people, didn't do it again because people couldn't park in front of their business. That is an old world model, and if that's what our focus is, we're going to be commodity centers. We're not going to have housing downtown. We're not going to have socialization. And we're going to be the people that are still putting perfume at the front of the store to fight off the smell of the horses. 100 years after horses haven't been ridden on Main Street. Let's not be that. Oh, that's still me, sorry.
We'll keep going.
All right, it's this I have to pull out all the time because my first degree was an honors degree in philosophy, and I really liked philosophy. This to me is one of the biggest problems we have with all of our communities. We don't know ourselves. I've had students when I was a junior high teacher say I want to be a doctor, but they fainted at the sight of blood. I think they missed the point of what they were really good at. But you know how many communities do the same sort of thing? And I can always tell when communities are doing this, when they have no idea who they really are. Because the first symptom is that they do a strategic plan, and it looks like everyone else's strategic plan. It's got the 5 dimensions of a community, the 5 major objectives they have to achieve under each, and 100 activities that go around the whole thing. And none of them have the time, energy, and the money to do any of it. And it has nothing to do with what makes them unique or who they really are. I mean, I challenge every single municipality. Rip the cover page off your strategic plan that has your name and shop it around to 5 other municipalities and ask them if they know which one this is for. If they don't know, if the people in your own community don't know it's your strategic plan, then it's generic and it's meaningless. It has to start with who you are. And your community of Okotoks has a brand and a reputation you can continue to build on. But so many communities are focused on trying to be like everyone else or trying to be perfect. Best place to work, live, and raise a family. And there's no place that is perfect. And you don't want to be like everybody else anyway. As I say in my 13 Ways presentation, your community will die when you try and be like everybody else or forget what makes you unique. Forget what makes you truly who you are. And it'll be just like that body in the morgue. Right? The one that dies that has no distinguishing characteristics, no identifying features that's separated from anyone else, no identification. And you know what they do? With those bodies, they put a little toe tag on it that reads John Doe. Only when your community dies, because you aren't focused on being really good at who you are, will read the best place to work, live, and raise a family. That's what your toe tag will read. And I remind people of this all the time. I'm going to give you a story, okay? Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Do I have time for this?
I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's not Lancaster, like Burt Lancaster. I thought it was, and I met someone from there, and they're like, no, it's Lancaster. So Lancaster, Pennsylvania is in the middle of the Rust Belt. And it, just like every other community in the Rust Belt, lost jobs because the coal mines closed, the steel production went down, some of it was shipped overseas, and people who had 4th generation jobs in the coal mine and with steel production, they weren't there. So all these young people left. Now Lancaster didn't do this on purpose. They didn't say we're going to be really good at who we are and we're going to know what makes us unique. It was by accident. But they looked around when all the young people left. They said, well, we've got a bunch of semi-retirees and seniors left. Let's focus on them. So they started with, click and collect, like at Superstore. They had a bunch of grocery stores and a bunch of underemployed high school students looking for a job. They created a database and married them up and said, look, seniors can call in their grocery order and the students can deliver and make some money. And the grocery stores loved it, and so did the seniors. And then the drugstore started in, and other stores started, and the seniors were like, this is great. They said to the seniors, what do you want next? They said, we want pickleball courts. Right? And they said, we have way too many tennis courts. We need pickleball. We want pickleball. So they converted a bunch of tennis courts to pickleball and made sure they set up a program right before the pandemic. They were going to have the International Pickleball Championship. Yeah, only Americans have I did. I always point out the Americans have these international competitions with only Americans allowed. When I'm there, they don't find that as funny as we do. But they had to then they had to cancel because of the pandemic, and they're bringing it back. It was great. They said, what else do you want? They said, well, you know what? I'd like to ride on a golf cart from one golf course to another, from neighborhood to neighborhood. They got rid of some of their walking trails and some of their bike paths. They said, only when the snow melts and only until the snow comes back, you can do that, though you can ride. Don't drink and be safe, but you can do that. And they loved it. Then they created more community gardens. They had more social events for seniors and dances, and the seniors loved it. And they didn't even think anything would happen, except all these seniors, because it's Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in the winter were cold, and they would go to Arizona and California and Florida for the winter months and brag about what Lancaster, Pennsylvania was doing to make their lives better. And other seniors around there would go, well, my community's not doing anything for me. And they become friends, and they go see them in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they say, what a great place, they have appropriate housing, this is great. And Lancaster did. New developers showed up because of the seniors that were moving there, because of the offerings they had, and new developers showed up and built new housing, all sorts of innovative housing. If you want to know anything about seniors housing, go to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Every new kind of housing is being tested there. And so new seniors moved there. Then the developers moved there to build the houses. The developers attracted new trades, and the trades showed up, and they were young people with young families, and they bought houses, and they set up other businesses. And then a bunch of young professionals moved in, because now with the new tax base, they redid the Main Street and beautified it. And they said, I'm going to open a business on Main Street and service all these new people that are moving there. And ta-da! Lancaster, Pennsylvania is one of the only communities in the Rust Belt that turned it around. And they did it accidentally, but they focused, coincidentally, on being really good at who they are. They knew who they were, they knew how they were going to grow, and it led to things they never anticipated. And now Lancaster has the most robust Young Professionals Association in the entire Rust Belt. You need to know who you are and be really damn good at it. Just like my son says all the time, I'm like, I'm glad I like you who you are. He said, Dad, I was going to try and be someone else, but everybody else was taken. Just be good at who you are, okay?
I just want to add, the Lancaster, they also did a job placement program for a lot of their, you can't call them seniors, right? Semi-retirees or newly retirees. I really like that. Similar to communities, of course, there's the business angle of it, and we can get inundated and try and be everything for everyone, but I just want to kind of hone in on a point here, that you have to remember what makes you unique and what you are good at. Don't make it too complicated. So let's talk about Toys R Us for a second. Do you guys still have a Toys R Us in the vicinity? Okay, so a couple years ago, I was able to hear the president of Toys R Us talk about their new plan for re-entering the Canadian market and going back into the United States. So they left the United States completely. I don't know if you can read that. It says, I guess everyone has grown up. There's no more Toys R Us kids. Well, that's sad. It's a little suitcase. I know. But think about so I had to think about my experience in Toys R Us, and the president said, this was in 2018, she said, you know, the cool thing about a toy store is that it should be fun. I'm like, yeah, a toy store should be fun. It like blew my mind that she said this. Has anyone been to a Toys R Us with a 5-year-old? Not fun. Not fun. You spend the whole time fighting with them. You're like, don't touch that. It is the definition of a big box distribution center, right? It houses toys. It is not a place that is fun. This is the New Jersey concept store. Doesn't that look fun? Think of the leverage you can use with that slide as a parent. Like if you're good, you can go on the slide, right? They want it to be an experience. Think of FAO, like remember Big, right? FAO Schwartz. This is and it's brilliant to me, and it's kind of annoying that it took them this long to figure it out. So I'm excited for them to come back, bring this brand new concept across North America, and this is what they're doing. This little picture here is a little store in Elk Rapids, Michigan, and it's like 400 square feet. If that, it's teeny tiny. The highest sales per square foot I've ever seen in my life. But they're a toy store, and they're so cute. Look at it, it's so cute. But you go in there, and they are the best salespeople I've ever met in my life, and they've been in business for 30 years or so. And they did a needs assessment with me right away. They're like, tell me about your kids. And my eldest has a speech delay. And she's like, you want this, you're gonna try this. And I was like, yes, amazing. So I spent like $200 on all these toys. And I come back to Doug, I'm like, make room in your suitcase. I gotta bring all this stuff back.
I bought a new suitcase.
Yeah. But it was a really cool thing. And so I dug in a little bit more, and I said, this is during the pandemic and post-pandemic now. How are you guys doing for sales? How was the pandemic for you? And they said it was great. People know us. People shop from all over the world for us because we are so good at knowing toys, and we'll just ship it out. They do millions of dollars a year in sales in 400 square feet. So again, you can't overcomplicate it either. You have to know what you're good at, because you can't be everything to everyone. Communication.
What's that? Okay, communication. So communication and marketing, I put these things hand in hand. Your story is what's most important and most valuable in what you're educating and communicating to people. We spend way too much time telling people some facts and some information. None of that motivates people. My favorite car commercial in the world, I think it was a Lincoln, and this goes back to when I was 10. Go smart ass comments. So a long time ago, but I still remember the ad on TV of the Lincoln driving down the road, and they could have said it had the most horsepower. They could have said it was the fastest, that it had the most comfort. It was 28 seconds of the clock on the dash ticking, and it said, takes quality to make sure that's all you hear. That was it. The story you sell is important, and it matters incredibly. And yet, most of the time, we worked in a community in Saskatchewan, their entire story on their website was all about what land is available, what the prices were for everything, and why it was a good place to invest. And yet, we were, well, you weren't with me, but I was just in Minnesota, and we met some recruiters and some site selectors. And while I'm there working with the state government and talking to them about some of the issues, the guy at the back, who was a site selector, said, number one thing we watch for is cooperation and collaboration. But the number two thing we watch for now is the quality of life in the community. My parents used to move to where the jobs were. And the jobs went to where the taxes were the lowest and the regulations were the least. But now jobs are moving to where people want to live. We worked in the community, and at the end, only one person said it. The rest of the community got it after 8 months of working with them. But one person said, Doug, we just need to create attract a new company that will create 200 jobs. Like, let me ask you, do you have 200 unemployed people in this town? And he said, no. I said, then they're not coming. I don't care if you have no taxes and no regulations and free water and free land, they're gonna say, who the hell's gonna work here? And he said, you're wrong. And we had worked on the Main Street design, walked him out. It was 8 o'clock at night on the main street, half the streetlights were burned out, and most of the businesses were empty and never opening, they were vacant. I said, who's going to invest here when you have no employees and nobody wants to live here? Another community we worked in Saskatchewan, quite a large one, 25, 30,000 people. When we talked about the need for quality of life, a few people kind of went, oh no, it's about the taxes and the regulations. And then somebody piped up, their economic development officer, in fact, and said, we just lost a business, 25 families, and the family said, we don't want to live in this town, there's nothing to do. So they moved it to Edmonton. And they realized quality of life is what attracts businesses and helps you keep them. But you need to be able to communicate and market that and tell the story about why it's a beautiful place to live and invest. And so every single community we asked says, we asked them, what do you need? And they say, we need 10 new businesses, 100 new people. The first thing we ask them is, what does the first person or the first business look like? And they don't know. Well, how are you going to get to 100 if you don't know what the first one looks like? You need to know who is going to want what you're offering and buy into it, and then your entire efforts are to continue to reinforce that so you can be really unique and attract that. You don't need 7 million people coming here. You just want 70. But you need to find the right 70 that want what you have to offer, and you continue to reinforce it. Then you market to those 3 neighborhoods where people are saying, oh, I can't wait to get there. And then I always emphasize, most people spend all of their time with communication and marketing externally. What's the population now of this community? 30,000. We'll go with 30,000. Do I hear 35? Suddenly felt like an auctioneer. 30,000 people. We worked with a professor of statistics at the University of Alberta, and he did some calculations for us and say, take the population of your community, you can multiply it by a factor of 20. That's your direct marketing. It takes out all the duplicates, it takes out kids, it takes out family. So that's a fair assessment. So 30,000 people times 20 is 600,000 people you can have direct marketing to. Now the reason why this is important is because if the province of Alberta, under whoever, comes forward and says we're going to give your community $1 million to market yourself,
And everyone in this community is negative and critical and says that nothing happens in this community, it won't work, we can't compete against the neighboring big city, and people need to leave here, taxes are too high, it's too expensive, nobody wants to live here, then the $1 million will be a waste. You might as well buy beer and donuts for everyone, because you will not undo the damage of the population of your community times 20 being negative. But if the population of your community times 20 is being positive, you might as well buy beer and donuts and have a party, because you will never have the same impact as that many people telling the story about how amazing the community of Okotoks is and what it's becoming. And so we emphasize to everyone, whenever you're working on your marketing and your communication strategy, half of your budget should be spent on making sure the people in the community know the story about what you're doing, what you're becoming, and why it's important, that they own the strategic plan, which I think you guys have done a brilliant job of doing. They own it and realize that it's not just up to the municipality, it's up to every single individual, every volunteer organization, every business, every not-for-profit, all of them pulling in the same direction. And then you have a unique brand and a unique story, and it will have a massive impact.
Okay, so this is a kind of a fun little, I know we're running short on time, so I'm gonna go through this really quickly. But in the world of consumers, there's a whole bunch of consumers, but right now there's two: value-driven consumer and purpose-driven consumer. So for the majority of human history, there were value-driven consumers. Those are the consumers that care about the price, right? They're the couponers, they're the ones that care about sales. Purpose-driven consumers are the ones that care about experience, quality, and time. So for the first time in history, there are more purpose-driven consumers now than there are value-driven consumers. That's not to say value-driven consumers are going anywhere. They're always going to be around, whether it's a circumstance or as part of their personality. If you gave my mother-in-law $10 million, she would never go to Starbucks. It's who she is and her core. But purpose-driven consumers are not new either. They're just, we're in an affluent time in the world, and people care about these things. Look, farmers markets are a really interesting example. From 2009 to 2019, they doubled in size in North America. That's crazy. It just goes to show what people are wanting and what they're spending their time on and their money on. So this is just really interesting. And we're gonna talk about some demographics here really quickly. So millennials, 1981 to 1998, who's born in that time? Really? That's it for millennials? Okay, I've got some good news for us though. We're gonna inherit $30 trillion.
Just the three of you.
Just the three of us, only us. We care about aesthetics more than any other generation. We're not motivated by sales. Probably because of all that money we're gonna inherit, which is great. We're a highly anxious. I don't know if you've ever seen on the TikTok those memes about us millennials. We're very anxious, and we want to be sure that we're having personal success, but we're really confident about our financial goals, probably because of all that money. Baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. Who's born in that? Awesome. Okay, so congratulations, you guys have the most wealth. Per person, all right.
That's who you're inheriting from.
Exactly. Our baby boomer parents are giving us the $30 trillion. So
There'll be
that's great.
nothing left.
There'll be nothing. I know you guys are going to spend it. I think you should. Although, whether you identify with what I'm saying or not, that's fine. My stats are coming from Visa reports and Monera, so it's generalization, which is, I think, fair to say. Boomers care about customer service more than anything else, and in Canada, we do a pretty average job. There's lots of room for us to do better at customer service. And they're on social media, Facebook. Gen Xers, 1964, 1965 to 1980-ish. Wow! Oh, that's so cool. It's like never, that's awesome. Okay, welcome Gen Xers to the Gen X night. I know, I love that.
Seriously, we're
Okay.
usually the small minority. I'm really, let's go.
Okay, so you Gen Xers, you guys love research. You guys are at the computer overthinking every purchase. You're in there and figuring it out, looking at reviews. But here's the weirdest irony about this. There's not a lot of research about Gen X spending patterns. Isn't that weird? I know, I'm sorry. But I did find you guys love personalization. So if something has like your monogram on it, you're buying 20. You love that. Okay, I want to talk about coffee for 1 sec. Guess how much millennials spend on coffee in a year in Canada? $2,300 a year on coffee. Do millennials feel bad about that? No, we love it. What do you think baby boomers spend a year on coffee in Canada? $5.80, right? A couple years ago, my in-laws were moving their parents, and I was like 7 months pregnant, so I couldn't help, which sucked. But to show my support, I showed up at Starbucks for everyone. Well, that was the wrong thing to do. She's like, I have Folgers, this is ridiculous. But of course, all the millennial cousins were excited, like, yay, Starbucks. But of course, all the boomer aunts and uncles were like, this is crazy. How much money did you spend on this? It became this whole thing. But it was a really cool story because we ended up, my mother-in-law figured out, she was like doing math, she spends $180 a year on coffee. She does her Costco Folgers and she's very proud about it. So I just wanted to point that out. I mean, like, again, there's lots of boomers who like Starbucks and there's lots of millennials that don't need to spend all that money on coffee. But I just think it's a fun idea. So don't judge the $7 coffee, just make the $7 coffee and sell it. Gen Z. Yeah, Gen Z. Okay, so Gen Z is anyone born in 1998 to 2011. I was like, wow. I need the secret. We're gonna talk after. Yeah, okay. Okay, but yeah, for real, any Gen Z? Yay, hi Gen Z, welcome. Okay, this sucks, we can't really talk about you because you're here.
Oh, you can.
Okay, we can. Okay, perfect. So Gen Z, obviously, they're the newest generation in the marketplace of work. They're gonna take over soon. In the next 15 years, they're gonna be the major players in the world of spending. They are so connected in their digital tools. I wanna use this picture. So this is a high school class in the States. The teacher, love her, said, hey, everyone turn on your notifications. This is 1 hour and 32 people. Okay? We've got Facebook, Snapchat, email, text message, phone calls, isn't that cute? Instagram, Twitter, group chat, and other. These are like Groupons and stuff. Actually, I don't even know if they do Groupons anymore, but you know what I mean.
I think I'm Gen Z.
You think you're Gen Z? Yay! Awesome. See, that's the point. You can identify with whatever you like. But this generation's not going to turn 30 and all of a sudden start watching commercials or taking in information in traditional sense. This is how they're going to do it for the rest of their lives primarily. They're going to adapt. They know how to use, they're digitally savvy. This is the group I get to work with every day at the university. And they're so smart. They love collaboration. They do not give a damn about, sorry, I didn't mean to start. They do not care at all about titles. They just want something done. People are like, oh no, volunteers, we're losing volunteers. And it's like, no, they just want to be part of a club. They don't want to like give up their second Thursday every month. They want to like learn what it is they have to do and they want to contribute to that. So I just find this to be a really interesting group. And of course, there's the alpha generation, which comes after, which I'll talk about right now. So the metaverse. I'm going to go too far down the metaverse because I am overwhelmed by it. So the metaverse, it's here. It's happening. The best way I can describe it is that you have your Oculus and you go into the metaverse. So Lululemon is buying space on the metaverse. How it would work is you have an avatar and it's your perfect size. It has everything perfectly measured. And your avatar tries on the clothes. And then it gets shipped to your house in the perfect size. So Lululemon's gonna have like 400 different sizes. So you're like walking around the store, you're like lifting stuff up, but it's completely virtual. People are getting married on the metaverse. I know, they've never met in real life, but they're getting married on the metaverse. It's so weird. I can't wrap my head around it. Something really unfortunate happened to my sister this summer. Her son, he's 9. She had a credit card charge from Nike, like $425. She's like, what the hell? I didn't get anything from Nike. And it was shoes for Elliot's avatar. So real $400, shoes for his avatar.
They're not real shoes.
They're not real shoes. They're shoes for his avatar. Okay? Everyone in his school was like, wow, you got the shoes. And Elliot was like a rock star. And I had to laugh. My sister was furious. And I'm like, I'm so glad that happened too, because now I get to tell this story. But
It's okay. Just so you know, she has another son who looks like he'll make it. So it's...
anyways. We can't be grumpy about the metaverse. It's coming, and we need to learn about it, and we need to be excited about it, and learn how to, like, even people who are grumpy about TikTok still. Get on TikTok. It's a huge source of revenue. Have you guys been to Indigo lately? There's like a huge section that says trending on TikTok, right? Get on TikTok. Be on TikTok. It's a huge source of revenue. Same thing with the metaverse. Just learn about it, be excited about it, and you can be totally. When someone's like, yeah, people are married and they've never met in real life, but they're married from the metaverse. I don't get it. I have no idea how that works. But it's coming. It's almost here. Done. Wrap it up because we're over.
And then, yeah, no, I'm so sorry. So I'll sum this up really quick. Collaboration, cooperation. Like I said when I was in Minnesota, and I've heard from site selectors now, the number one thing that deters them from investing in the community is not, they don't look and say, do you have the water, do you have the infrastructure, do you have the roads? It's collaboration and cooperation. They will send people to the school board meeting to see how well people get along. They will send people to join council meetings to see how well people get along. And if they don't, their first inclination is that it will mean duplicate business permits, duplicate permitting process, duplicate development stuff, or oh my God, we're going to be in a fight over the fire department. There's municipalities here in Alberta. There were 5 towns and 1 county. We were doing a regional economic development strategy for them. They had a joint fire service agreement for 20 years. And then some new people got elected onto council, and they started to say, no, my taxpayers paid for that fire truck. Well, my taxpayers paid for the fire hall. Well, you're not telling my firefighters what to do. And the agreement broke down, and they all went back and had their own fire departments. And it turns out all the professional firefighters they paid for had to leave because no one could afford a professional one, so they were all volunteers. And ta-da, it all fell apart. And they said, when we were working on the regional collaborative economic development stuff, could you help us figure out what to do? All I did was ask some questions, called a meeting of all the councils and said, here's the situation you've got. You've got 6 municipalities, all with their own volunteer fire departments because you won't get along and cooperate. Out of all 6 of you, there are only 3 of you that have people who are trained and qualified to drive a fire truck because you need a special license. There are only 2 of you that have 1 person, and each of them only had 1 person who can operate the fire truck because they're complex devices. And no one in your fire department anymore has any training to actually do fire rescue. So you know what's going to happen? There's going to be a house fire and someone's going to die, and you're all going to go to jail. And if you don't believe me, look at Walkerton. Look at what was the other one in Michigan? Flint, Michigan, where a bunch of politicians got into an ego fight about who's going to own stuff. They turned on their old water system because they didn't want Detroit to tell them what to do, and 12 people died. And even the governor, only a year and a half ago, got charged. 13 people went to jail over that. So I told them, you're going to go to jail because this is not about your egos. This is not about your little finite territory that you're going to fight over. This is about the people you serve. And yet, I still, working with another group, there were 2 towns in the county, and we're going to work on regional economic development, and a guy from the county stood up after the presentation and said, Doug, you say we're friends and we need to work together. You're wrong. Those people in the county, or in the town, they want our tax dollars so we could build another pool, so they could put up more streetlights, so they could do all sorts of fancy stuff. They're not our friends, they're our enemy. And another guy from the county, before I got to say anything, stood up and looked at him and said, but doesn't your mom live in town? So I have a new presentation about collaboration called I've Seen the Enemy, and it's my mom. We're not fighting over these boundaries that were drawn 120 years ago. We're no longer competing against each other. We're competing against jurisdictions. Like the Calgary region is competing against Denver or North Carolina, where we're not fighting against each other anymore. And I'll tell the story because you reminded me of this before we went on. The Capital Region. When I was Minister of Municipal Affairs, I went to the Capital Region, the Edmonton Board, and now they had like 28 municipalities in the city of Edmonton. Now they only have 13. But I remember saying, what are you guys trying to do? Why don't you call it something else instead of the Capital Region Board? And they said, because if we name it Edmonton, they'll get all the stuff, and we need to make sure we share. So I put up on the screen and Googled it, the Capital Region Board. You know where Edmonton and all the municipalities came up? On page 4. If you want to bury a dead body, you do it on page 2 of Google, because no one looks there. And this is on page 4, and it took years still before they finally changed it to the Edmonton Metro Board. And what they do now is market Edmonton, and when people are coming, then they also market Beaumont. and Fort Saskatchewan, and Leduc, because every single one of those communities has a different quality of life and a different offering, and together, the region is more competitive against places like Raleigh, North Carolina, or Denver, Colorado. You need to collaborate and cooperate if you're going to be stronger. That's it. And every business and industry is looking for collaboration as the #1 sign that that's a place they want to invest.
That's it. Oh, sorry.
That's
That's it.
it.
We're so over time. Sorry. Thank you so much.